Hi guys and welcome back. About 8 months ago I introduced you to a new hi-fi brand called ONIX that is closely collaborating with Xiaoling for a while now. Their very first XM5 digital audio player was tested around here and it impressed me with a small form factor, with a beautiful OLED screen and most importantly with great Sonics to boot. They recently introduced a slightly beefier but also much slimmer looking unit which is called XM10 Limited. It's slightly higher priced, we have a much bigger 6-inch Full HD screen. Finally, we have an open Android 13 platform, which is something new in the world of portable digital audio players. And it's also incredibly thin, as you can see. So thin that a 4.4mm balancer jack was impossible to implement, and that's why they adapted a 5-pole 3.5mm jack and bundled it with a short adapter to which you can attach your 4.4mm balancer cables. It goes for $899 in the USA or 999 euros here locally, and it's the right time to check it out. Today I'll talk a little bit more about the build quality of this unit because this is where the XM10 Limited will impress you right away. If you ever held in your hand a portable digital audio player made out of stainless steel that usually demands a hefty price point, just have a look at Astel & Kern units and you'll realize how expensive they can get. Well, we have exactly the same materials on the XM10 Limited. And while the unit is incredibly thin at just 11.5mm, it feels premium in my hand and quite hefty since stainless steel is weightier compared to aluminum. The front and back panels are fully covered in glass, and I see that glass protectors have been applied already in the factory, and if at some point you'll need to change them, there are 2 extra glass protectors in the package. The buttons can sometimes feel squeaky on several DAPs, sometimes they are wobbling in their sockets, but here there is zero play and they offer a very satisfactory feel when pressed. While its price is far from what I already experienced with the HiBy R6 and R8 Mark II, I feel that the build quality is on the same level with those much pricier units. Next, we need to talk about this screen. It's a 6-inch Full HD screen, but what's more important to me is the brightness and contrast. It's almost on the same level with inky blacks on my Samsung S24 Ultra OLED screen. I have a slightly pricier HiBy R6 PRO MAX right beside me, and while it uses a similar screen size, the colors pop a lot more on the XM10 Limited, and the brightness can reach much higher numbers as well. You can also spot a notch on top with the ONIX logo, brightly lit, but if you find it annoying, you can disable that backlight. This notch wasn't really bothering to me because I don't use portable DAPs for gaming on the go or for watching movies, and it was a non-issue when casually browsing online. Moving on to controls, as previously mentioned, the unit is so incredibly thin that putting a 4.4mm balancer connector was pretty much impossible, and that's why they went with a 5-pole 3.5mm balancer jack that allows you to use your regular single-ended headphones that have a 3.5mm connector, or you can use the included 3.5 to 4.4mm adapter, which you can connect headphones terminated with a balanced 4.4mm Pentacon jack. This adapter seems to be well made, it's quite stiff, it should serve you well for a longer period of time, and I like that it doesn't add any microphonics on its own. Apart from this small inconvenience, we also have a micro SD card slot that supports big capacity cards up to 2 TB in size, and there's your usual USB Type-C connector used for charging, data transfer, or for using this one as a USB DAC. It was probably a challenge finding such a slim profile volume knob to fit this unit, so instead they went with volume buttons, which personally I don't mind. As for tech inside it, we finally have an open Android platform that lets you install any third-party app from Google Play Store. The interesting part is that we do not have the Android 12 that you can find basically on any other portable DAP, but Android 13, so this is newer. The app support should be nicer, and overall this is more future-proof in a way compared to others. 6 gigs of RAM are on board, together with 128 gigs of ROM memory. on which you can install any third-party app or save a few lossless albums. I wish it would come with 256 gigs of memory by default, but considering that big capacity micro SD cards are so cheap nowadays, it's no longer bothering me as much. The good old Snapdragon 665 is again present, which you can see basically on every Android-based portable player released in the last 3 years or so. This is already an aging silicon and is definitely not on the same level with modern smartphones, but it still does the job done while listening to music or just casually browsing the internet. Moving on to everything that has to do with audio circuitry. First of all, we have the newest and the highest performance DAC chip and delta sigma modulator of AKM, more exactly the AK4499EX together with the AK4191 modulator, so this is already a great starting point. Perhaps what's more interesting is the adoption of some of the cleanest sounding op-amps that I've tried in a very long time. The AD8397 that are basically legendary. You can see them in some of the best portable headphone amplifiers of today or in some of the best portable DAPs. So again, this is a very good thing. It provides 877 milliwatts of power per channel in 32 ohms in high gain if you use the balanced output, and about 4 times less power if you use a regular 3.5mm headphone jack, single-ended I mean. Which is not so much, but should be enough even for a few desktop headphones, but we'll see about that in a minute. Everything is controlled by the ONIX Brighton architecture, technology that powers also the ONIX Miracle Stack that I tried at the high-end show in Munich. Dual-band Wi-Fi is of course present, including AirPlay 2, DLNA and SyncLink, and we also have two-way Bluetooth with some of the nicest codecs available right now. The only downside I see with such a super slim unit is the battery capacity, because we have a 4300 mAh battery, so not a huge one. So this one will provide you around 9 hours of music playback with the music at the minimum settings on low gain with IAMS. But if you use some planar magnetic headphones via balanced output, high gain, then the playtime will be at around 7.5 hours. Last but not least, we have a much lower output impedance compared to the ONIX XM5. It sits at near zero if you connect some single-ended headphones and about 1 ohm if you use the balanced connection, which should leave a positive mark, especially when controlling some dynamic headphones and IAMS compared to the XM5. Moving on to sound impressions, ONIX is trying to market this one as a high-end digital audio player that is destined to be used with high-end IAMS. And sure enough, there is plenty of power on top. We have near zero output impedance. The noise floor is so incredibly low that I cannot hear it even at maximum volume on low gain. So of course it will easily drive all your IAMS without a problem. The noise floor will never be a problem. So yes, I think it will drive pretty easily all your IAM collection. But me, myself and Irene decided to use some hardcore desktop planar headphones because why not? I mean, it sounds great with them. And I'll say it right from the start. So this one is much thinner compared to a HiBy R6 PRO MAX that I reviewed a few weeks ago. As you can see, it's also lighter weight compared to this one, but the driving power is more impressive on the ONIX. I'm not sure if we have a better voltage output or a higher gain or a better amplification factor, but clearly my headphones sound more engaging and the bass is simply more playful compared to the HiBy R6 PRO MAX. So what was 70 out of 100 volume levels on the R6 PRO MAX was around 60 out of 100 on the ONIX XM10 Limited. Of course, that doesn't tell you a lot because you don't know how the volume is going, logarithmic or linear, but there's always a feeling that the music is simply more dynamic and I have a lot more headroom remaining on top while listening to music via XM10 Limited. These two share quite a few similarities. For example, we have pretty much the same display size, 6-inch on both devices, although this one is brighter and more contrasty. But the sound, what's interesting, this one is a little bit punchier sounding, more dynamic, especially in the bass. You can feel that right away, not only with desktop headphones, but with IAMS as well. The overall sound tuning of the XM10 Limited can be described as clean, as resolving, and also quite layered. There's a very nice separation of the notes, and I don't mean a big sound stage, but a really nice depth. Like you can hear how many layers of sounds are shooting towards your ears. All in all, it has an impressive separation of the notes, especially when used in balanced mode, and it never presses the brakes when it comes to dynamics. I reviewed the HiBy R6 PRO MAX just a couple of weeks ago, and I still like it. I find it exemplary. I like everything about its sound, and those sound enhancements are simply priceless. On the ONIX, except for the gain, digital filter and EQ, there is not so much room for sound enhancements. But if I compare these two in stock form, then the ONIX feels a little bit more resolving, cleaner sounding, the background is by a hair darker, but what's more interesting, it was driving my desktop planar headphones with more ease and with more finesse. The big surprise came when I started playing around with HiFi HE1000 availed on the XM10 Limited. These usually demand a healthy amount of power and current to be fully controlled and to be fully driven, usually a Class A biased desktop headphone amplifier, but this slim fellow wasn't really struggling with such a load, and I didn't quite expect that. Instead of choosing some lightweight tracks, I went full assault mode on the XM10 and chose to use some punchy sounding electronica. It rendered all of that energy quite beautifully. The bass output, for example, it stood out a little bit more. The mid-range came next into the spotlight, and the treble region was not seeking for my attention. The absolute highest volume I could reach with the HE1000 availed was 65 out of 100 via the balanced output, so again leaving plenty of headroom on top, and I'm not really sure why ONIX is marketing this one as a high-end DAP for high-end IEMs, because it works very well even with planar headphones. T+A Solitaire P are currently my favorite planar headphones. Here I said it. You can check my video about them if you want to learn more about them right here. These are very technical, but also quite pleasing and natural if you have the right selection of electronics. They also demand more power compared to HE1000 availed, so the volume went up to 70 out of 100, but again I had plenty of headroom even for some DSD recordings, for example. These didn't sound exactly as punchy and alive as I know them to be on my desktop headphone amplifiers, but that was to be expected. The interesting part is that XM10 Limited was still refusing to hit the brakes when it came to dynamics. The bass never clipped, not even when arriving at close to maximum power. It was not lowering the intensity of the bass, and more importantly, distortion was always in check, and I don't see the problem of using it with desktop planar or dynamic headphones. The more time I invested listening to it, the more time I started to appreciate the way it deals with micro detail, with all of those nuances and resolution and transparency. For example, I find it forgiving sounding, so forget about brightness. Listening fatigue is not boosting the contours of the notes, it's not really clinical sounding, but at the same time I found it resolving and clean sounding. I don't know, it's difficult putting the same words forgiving and resolving in the same sentence, especially when talking about portable devices, but that's exactly what I'm getting with the XM10 Limited. Usually some high-end DACs can be forgiving and clean and resolving, and I'm not sure what mambo jumbo that Brighton architecture is doing, but this one is clean, resolving and forgiving at the same time. Besides impressing with its resolving abilities and with that smooth and organic sounding character, I also like the way it deals with stereo separation, but more exactly with the layering. Something that I already experienced on the ONIX XM5, but this one is doing that better. This one is not exactly bigger sounding or airier sounding compared to, say, R6 PRO MAX by HiBy or Fire M23, but it has a nicer separation in between the layers. It sounds a little bit deeper. Like you no longer listen to regular tunes, but to some pseudo-binaural music in a way. The music is not a lot to your left or to your right, but it definitely circles all around you, which is quite interesting. The sound can get better with a desktop tube-based headphone amplifier or Class A solid-state headphone amplifier, that is for sure, that can bring that, amazing soundstage. But this one impresses you mostly in terms of depth, stereo separation, and also layering. Last but not least, I cannot go forward without telling you about the really nice balance it has in terms of frequency response. I won't talk a lot about the bass, mid-range, and treble as I usually do, but you need to know that this one will impress you a little bit more in terms of bass delivery, bass quantity and quality. Mid-range comes next, and treble, although is very clear, it's not drawing lots of attention to that region. This is not what would I call a ultra-linear or dead neutral sounding portable digital audio player. This one is drawing your attention mostly the bass oomph and impact towards a denser mid-range, putting lots of meat on the bone, and then you'll get a somewhat relaxed treble output that is not rolling off the top octave. My reference setup has a very similar tuning, sounding extended at both ends and clean, but without adding glare or listening fatigue. In case you're wondering if you should pick up the ONIX XM10 Limited or the HiBy R6 PRO MAX, first of all, I need to tell you that these are sounding great. I like this sound signature, and also the build quality is also quite fantastic. At this point, I believe there is not a more customizable DAP on the market like those of HiBy, presenting not only a parametric EQ option, but also hardware plugins and many other settings that work on the hardware level with the HiBy devices. If you like to tune your sound according to your mood, to your IAMs or whatnot, then I believe HiBy is a better choice, no doubt. Although it's much thicker and heavier, and it has a much bigger battery as well, I was surprised to get a very similar runtime via balanced output. By contrast, I find the XM10 Limited more pocketable, it's easier to carry around, and my pens don't feel so bulky with the ONIX. But perhaps the nicest things to say about the ONIX is that the overall tonality is thicker, the sound gets weightier, adding a higher dose of bass and mid-range compared to HiBy. That should work with a wider variety of headphones and IAMs. Brighter tilted IAMs sounded better on the ONIX, for example, and warmer and sweeter sounding IAMs had a nicer tonal balance on the HiBy. So it's really up to your preference at this point. One last thing that I want to mention is that the driving power is a bit higher on the ONIX, and thus the control over the drivers would be better. If you plan on using desktop headphones time and time again, I believe that ONIX seems like a better choice. Wrapping up, this is a slim, powerful, but also distortionless, noiseless, natural and organic sounding digital audio player that knows how to juggle with the layering, stereo separation, and also with the depth. And let's not forget that Android 13 opens the door to a much better app support long-term compared to Android 12 found on many other portable digital audio players. At first, I thought it wouldn't do proper justice to desktop planar headphones, but I guess tons of experience that Shanling gathered over the years left a positive mark on these ONIX devices. Except for a short battery life and not having a dedicated line out and a 4.4mm balanced output, this is basically everything I can complain about this one, because the build quality is simply top-notch, the stainless steel look is striking, its display is big, bright and contrasty, and the sound is simply right up my alley, and I'm sure a lot of folks will adore its slim profile and smartphone-like aesthetics. Alright guys, please let me know in the comment section below what you think about the ONIX XM10 Limited, and as usual, thanks for watching, please consider liking and subscribing if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you very soon.